Hello, my friends. This is Dr. M with you to support your experience with intermediate microeconomics. So last time I left you where we started talking about animal experiments. In particular, we talked about rats as rational creatures and how amazingly we replicate their behavioral choices, and thus their choices that they make is a very good case study for human consumption and production at the marketplace. So basically, this experiment that I'm going to discuss, this particular one, was done at the University of A&M and out of Texas. Basically, a Skinner box is a type of rat cage, special type of rat cage, and at this rat cage at the end they placed two dispensers to dispense two type of goods. One good was food pellets and the other one was root beer. So the researchers discovered that rats like food pellets and flat root beer. There were two ways to observe changes in consumption by the rats when their income changes. Number one, follow me carefully. A change in the number of lever presses per unit of distribution is going to be equivalent to the price change. So you have a lever presser that is moving like this, and when the rat is pushing the lever presser down, then there is a change in the unit of distribution of the root beer or the number of pellets that are being available. The second type to observe the distribution as it relates to consumption is fixing the number of lever presses they can get, and that is equivalent to the income change. So they basically fix the number of food pellets per press, or the amount of root beer available per press, and that would be equivalent to the change in income. If animals die, experiment is stopped and death is not an option. When this experiment was repeatedly done at Texas A&M, it took on average 3 days for rats to adjust their behavior. And what they found that income elasticity for root beer was greater than 1, which means that the root beer was superior good for rats, and thus whenever rats received income increased by 10%, they would increase consumption by more than 10%, by 20 of that good. So now we understand how researchers set up this experiment to replicate the price change versus income change. And now we can continue to look through some choices that the rats experienced. As I stated to you, the price of root beer was fixed at 1 press. The price of pellets was fixed at 1 press. The income was allowed to be 125 presses. And what researchers observed, they observed the ratio of 40 to 85, 40 root beer distribution to 85 food pellets, which basically indicated that how much rats liked root beer versus pellets and how they adjusted their consumption. Researchers also discovered that as income was doubled and it took the 250 presses for rats to stop pressing, and at this point it was a discovery by researchers of labor and leisure model. remember we talked about in the previous video backward bending supply curve, and I introduced to you to the idea that every one of us has our own response rate or elasticity as our income or wage rate change how much we are willing to give up leisure. And for rats in this experiment was income was equal to 250 presses. Now, I wish you could draw this analysis on the graph. From previous presentations, you have everything you need to demonstrate graphically this rat's problem. So why don't you do this on your own? And I think it would be very helpful for you to complete such exercise. The other item that I wanted to bring to your attention, Giffen rat. We talked about Giffen paradox. Giffen rat was observed to be either enormous in size or starving to death. In other words, the only way for rats to represent Giffen theory was to bring them to jeopardy of death by either not allowing them to drink or eat, and they quit doing either one when their life was in jeopardy. So here's my question that I want you to think about on your own. You can stop the video after that. I pose this question. Why Giffen rat exhibiting or representing Giffen theory when it's enormous in size and when it's starving to death? What is so special about rats, and clearly special about any living organisms, including humans, when we are enormous in size or when we starve to death? Why are we experience propensity to represent Giffen theory? And that would be a very cool question for you to answer. All right, so now we can move towards the next slide, and to prompt you represent this analysis of animals on the graph. So I suggest that you pause this video and you answer the question about the Giffen rat, and you also answer the question as it relates to presenting all this rat's problem on the graph. Because unless and until you do, it's really hard to grasp the material. Assuming that you have completed this exercise, I am just for your convenience summarizing what you guys need to do on the slide, and assuming that you have completed, I'm moving towards another problem that is related to mice. So as you see, and as you may know, we use our animals to understand more about humans. That's an interesting approach, and it's evident that there's a lot of in common that we share between animals and humans. Just think about how much organ tissue is manufactured from pigs for human consumption. When it comes to thyroid replacement, when it comes to other tissue replacement. So in some ways, we are so close to animals as humans that it's actually scary at times. All right, the scary part is going to happen within the next couple of minutes as I am going through this mice experiment. 1972, scientists in England performed another experiment that was related to human choices. And basically what they did, they placed two pairs of mice, male and female, in a large area while providing unlimited food and unlimited drink. You can think about a communism replication, so to speak. So under communism, you can eat and drink and be married, and it's just no constraints in terms of consumption. So, and they also adjusted the environment temperature for the mice to the perfect degree, so they are not cold and they are not hot, and thus inducing mice to enjoy leisure at the fullest rate without any concern for the search of food or shelter or climate condition. That is quite fascinating. And what is fascinating about the experiment is what happened to this mice. And as I go through item one by one that was observed through repeated experiment, this experiment was repeated multiple times with the same outcomes. I want you to think about what happens to behavioral people or choices of people. So here's behavioral choices observed. Once they started this experiment and they set up all those perfect conditions for mice, the first thing they observed, rapid population growth. So mice was very happily multiplying, and it was happening very fast. Then as time goes by, they noticed that stronger mice started to destroy and overpower the weaker mice. That's an interesting change in behavioral choices as mice continues to enjoy unlimited food, unlimited drink, and perfect living condition. Then they also noticed as time went by that mothers stopped naturally feeding the young ones. And that's, my friends, happens to us as people throughout human history. The parallel is frightening. The parallels are so frightening that it shakes me to the core of my bones. Then they observed cannibalism and homosexuality that was taking place among mice. And isn't that something that we observe with the human history? And on 1782nd day, last mouse dies following total self-destruction. So I promised you it's going to be scary, and with apologies, with some humor, maybe not to all of your liking, but nevertheless, I want you to demonstrate that this experiment has been done in 70s, repeatedly, with the same outcomes over and over. And because those outcomes have been less than desirable, this type of material has not been published as much or republished, because socialism and communism is still very attractive and bringing people from the misery of everyday life by giving them unlimited food, unlimited drink, and perfect environment condition. I want you to caution here, because constraints that imposed upon us in terms of time and in terms of income and in terms of otherwise capability is God's will, and we should be very respectful of such constraints. And we discussed that previously, and I want you to appreciate this type of experiment where it's been consistently revealing to us the outcome that is so a mirror image of what is happening to us. And on this encouraging note, I'm going to wish you a healthy day, and we'll talk soon.